The night was cold and quiet over Northfell when the first sound of boots echoed through the narrow path leading to Elira Voss's cottage. She had just finished grinding herbs for a sick child in the village when she heard the sharp knock on her door, followed by the heavy voices of guards. Before she could ask what was happening, the door was thrown open, and 4 men in the king's colors stepped inside. "Elira Voss, you are under arrest by order of King Draven Ashwood," one of them said, his voice cold and final. She stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding. "Arrest? For what crime?" "Treason against the crown," the guard replied. "You will come with us now." Elira had no time to argue. Rough hands seized her arms, and she was pulled out into the night air, her bare feet meeting the frozen ground. The villagers who had gathered at the sound of the commotion watched in silence, too afraid to speak against the king's men. Some whispered her name with pity, others with fear, but none dared step forward. As she was dragged through the village square, Elira's mind raced. She had done nothing wrong. She was a healer, not a warrior, not a spy, not someone who dealt in politics or plots. Her days were spent tending wounds and easing fevers, not scheming against kings. Yet here she was, chained and marched toward the towering stone keep that loomed over Northfell like a silent judge. Inside the dungeon beneath the keep, the air was damp and heavy with the smell of old stone. Elira was placed in a cell with nothing but a thin blanket and a small window too high to reach. She sat in the corner, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. She thought of the one night, months ago, when everything had changed for her, though she never expected it to lead to this. It had been a quiet evening after a pack gathering, before Draven had fully taken his father's throne. They had spoken for hours, 2 strangers drawn together by something neither of them understood. That night had ended before dawn, and neither of them spoke of it again. Elira had told herself it meant nothing, that a future king would never think of a healer from the lower village again. She had buried the memory deep, never imagining it would return to haunt her in chains. Hours passed before she heard footsteps approaching her cell. She looked up to see torches lighting the corridor, and behind them, the unmistakable figure of King Draven Ashwood himself. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the entire pack on them. His expression was unreadable as he stopped before her cell. "Elira Voss," he said quietly, his voice much softer than the guards who had arrested her. "Do you know why you are here?" "No, my king," she said, lifting her chin despite her fear. "I have committed no crime. I only wish to know what I am accused of." Draven studied her for a long moment. There was something in her eyes, not the fear of a guilty woman, but the confusion of someone truly lost. He had received a report from his council, claiming she had been passing secrets to a rival pack, secrets that could endanger the safety of Northfell. He had acted quickly, perhaps too quickly, ordering her arrest before he could question the truth of the claim himself. "You are accused of treason," he said finally, "of sharing information with our enemies." Elira shook her head, her voice trembling but firm. "I have never spoken to anyone outside this village about pack matters. I do not even know the names of our enemies, my king. I only know herbs and healing, nothing more." Draven said nothing, but something in her voice made him pause. He had learned over the years to recognize lies, and this did not sound like one. Still, he could not dismiss the claims without more information. He ordered his men to bring the pack physician to examine her, hoping to find some evidence, though he was not entirely certain what he expected to find. When the physician arrived and began his examination, he suddenly stopped and looked up at the king with wide eyes. "My king," he said carefully, "there is something you must know. This woman is with child." The room fell silent. Draven's expression shifted from cold authority to something unreadable, almost startled. "How far along?" "Nearly 3 months," the physician answered. Draven's mind quickly calculated the timing, and the realization struck him like a blow. 3 months ago was the very night he had spent with Elira, the night neither of them had spoken of since. His wolf, usually silent and controlled, stirred within him, recognizing something ancient and undeniable, the scent of his own blood in the child she carried. He stepped closer to the cell, his voice lower now. Is the child mine? Elira met his gaze without flinching, though tears now threatened to fall. Yes, there has been no one else. For a long moment, Draven said nothing. The weight of what this meant settled over him slowly. This woman, whom he had ordered arrested for treason, was carrying his heir. By the ancient laws of the pack, no harm could come to a woman carrying the blood of the Alpha King, treason charges or not. But more than the law, something deeper stirred in him, a recognition he could not ignore. He ordered her released from the cell immediately and taken to proper quarters within the keep, though he remained cautious, unwilling to fully trust the situation until he understood how the treason accusations had come to be in the first place. He called for his council the next morning, demanding to know the source of the claims against her. The councilman who had brought the accusation, a man named Corwin, grew nervous under the king's questioning. He insisted his sources were reliable, but when pressed for names and evidence, his answers became vague and inconsistent. Draven's suspicion grew. He had known Corwin for years, a man who had always resented his rise to power, believing himself more fit to guide the pack's decisions from behind the throne. Meanwhile, word of Elira's condition spread quickly through the keep, though not everyone believed the truth of it. Some whispered that she had fabricated the pregnancy to save herself from punishment. Others claimed the child could belong to any man in the lower village, refusing to accept that their king could be tied to a simple healer. The rumors reached Elira's ears, and though they hurt deeply, she remained composed, focusing instead on protecting the child growing inside her. Draven, despite his own uncertainty, found himself defending her more fiercely than he expected. When one of his advisors dared suggest the child might not be his, Draven's temper flared in a way the court had rarely witnessed. "The wolf does not lie," he said firmly. "I know my own blood when I sense it. This matter is settled." As days passed, Draven began spending more time near Elira, partly to ensure her safety, and partly because he found himself drawn to her in ways he could not explain. He asked about her life in the village, her work as a healer, the families she had helped over the years. She spoke honestly, without trying to impress him or gain his favor, and this honesty slowly began to soften the walls he had built around himself since becoming king. One evening, as they sat together in the quiet garden behind the keep, Elira finally asked the question that had weighed on her since her arrest. "Why did you believe them so quickly? Did you truly think I could betray you and our people?" Draven was silent for a long moment, staring at the moonlit trees. "I did not want to believe it," he admitted. "But as king, I cannot afford to ignore reports of treason, no matter how much doubt I carry. I acted out of duty, not judgment. I should have questioned you myself before sending guards to your door. That failure is mine to carry." Elira nodded slowly, understanding the burden he carried as ruler, though it did not erase the pain of that night. "I forgive the king for his duty," she said softly, "but I hope the man understands the fear he caused." Draven turned to look at her, something shifting in his eyes. "I do understand, and I intend to make it right." True to his word, Draven began a quiet investigation into Corwin and his allies, uncovering a plot far more dangerous than a simple false accusation. Corwin had been working with a rival pack, hoping to weaken Draven's rule by removing anyone connected to his bloodline before an heir could be born. Elira had been targeted specifically because Corwin had somehow learned of her connection to the king, seeing her as a threat to his own ambitions long before Draven himself understood the significance of that single night they had shared. When the evidence was finally gathered, Draven called for a full assembly of the pack. Standing before his people, he revealed the truth of Corwin's betrayal, presenting proof of secret meetings with the rival pack, and forged documents meant to frame Elira for crimes she never committed. The pack listened in stunned silence as their king exposed the depth of the conspiracy that had nearly cost an innocent woman her life and freedom. "I was deceived," Draven said, his voice carrying across the assembly hall. "And in my haste, I caused harm to a woman who has done nothing but serve this pack with kindness and skill. I will not allow that mistake to stand uncorrected." He turned to where Elira stood at the edge of the hall, her hands resting gently over the small curve of her stomach. "Elira Foss carries my child, the future heir of Northfell. More than that, She has shown me honesty and strength when I offered her only suspicion. Before this pack, I name her my true mate, and I ask her to stand beside me as queen." A murmur swept through the crowd, but it was not one of anger or doubt. Many had already heard whispers of her condition, and seeing their king humble himself before the entire pack, admitting his mistake so openly, earned a quiet respect that no forced authority could have achieved. Elira stepped forward, tears in her eyes, and took her place beside him, no longer a prisoner in chains, but a woman honored before her people. Corwin and his allies were stripped of their titles and cast out from Northfell, forbidden from ever returning to Packlands. The rival pack that had conspired with him quickly distanced themselves, unwilling to face the full wrath of a king who had just proven he would protect his own with unwavering determination. In the months that followed, Elira settled into her new life as queen. Though she never forgot her roots as a healer, she continued to tend to the sick and injured within the keep, refusing to abandon the skills that had defined her before fate placed a crown upon her head. The pack, who once saw her only as an outsider from the lower village, began to admire her for the compassion she brought to her new position, proving that a queen could rule with both strength and gentleness. Draven, too, changed in ways the pack noticed. He became more careful in his judgments, no longer acting purely on reports without seeking the truth for himself. He often credited Elira for reminding him that leadership required patience as much as authority, and that even a king could be wrong. As winter turned to spring, Elira gave birth to a healthy child, a daughter with her mother's calm eyes and her father's strong presence. The entire pack celebrated the arrival of the heir, and the night of chains and fear that had once marked Elira's story became a distant memory, replaced by the image of a queen holding her child beneath the light of the Northfell moon. Draven stood beside her, watching the two people who now meant more to him than his throne ever could. "I once ordered your arrest," he said softly, "not knowing I was condemning the mother of my child, the woman who would become my queen." Elira smiled up at him, exhaustion and joy mixing in her expression. "And now you know," she said, "that sometimes the truth arrives in the most unexpected way." Together, they watched over their daughter, knowing that the mistakes of the past had led them, against all odds, to a future neither of them could have imagined on that cold midnight when guards first came knocking at her door. Northfell, once shaken by fear and betrayal, found new strength under a king who had learned humility and a queen who had shown him mercy, their bond becoming the foundation of a peace that would last for generations to come.